Welcome back to another episode of That's Business. Today's guest, Antisha Walley, is a U.S. Air Force veteran, now entrepreneur with more than 15 years of HR experience. She served in the military, public and private sector environments with the specific goal of motivating personnel to achieve peak performance while helping businesses grow exponentially. Not only this, but she has been featured in Business Insider, AfroTech, and Yahoo News with her inspirational story of how she left corporate HR to build a six-figure business while doing things her way. Well, we have so many spicy topics to talk about today, Antisha. So thank you, first and foremost, for being on the podcast. I'm excited to have you.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
You served in the military. Did you always know, like from childhood, you wanted to serve in the military, or what was your childhood like, if you feel comfortable sharing that with us?
So I had a really great, really awesome childhood. No, I did not know that I wanted to join the military. To be honest, I wanted to go to the Art Institute of New York. I'm from Mississippi. My mother, I loved interior decorating, interior design. My mother did not want me to go that far away from home, so she told me I couldn't go. So as a rebellious child, I said, okay, well, I'm going to go into the military and let them send them all over the world wherever they want to, and you're not going to be able to stop that. True story, and my mother will tell you. It worked out though. But yes, I decided to go into the Air Force on my own. It wasn't something that I thought about as a child.
Oh my gosh. So how old were you when you joined? And I mean, that's a big commitment to let's just, do this for a few years here and there.
Yeah. So I was 17. It's really interesting too, because a lot of people, they graduate high school and then they go off into the military. Well, I actually have gone off into the military and graduated from basic training before I even walked the field. So I graduated from basic training prior to me graduating from high school. So it was a kind of interesting story, but I was 17 years old.
Wow. What was that like? I mean, first of all, I feel like the harder piece of going through basic training and then deciding to walk across that stage for graduation. I mean, you grew up in the military, which is crazy. So what was that kind of like in your late teens, early 20s?
It was very unique because most of my friends, of course, they graduated in May and then they went off into the military. So I had a pretty high GPA and I also had enough credits to graduate early. So my graduation year was 2001, but I actually got out. I finished school in December of 2000. So because I finished in 2000, I was eligible to join the military in March of 2001. So I went in March of 2001, went through basic training, graduated in April of 2001. And then I went back home to Mississippi in May of 2001. And that's when I walked across the field to graduate with my class. So I'm one of those very few people in the world who actually was sworn into the military before she ever got her high school diploma. So it was interesting. It was cool. It was unique and interesting.
Well, and one of the very few people that's able to, I feel, graduate from high school early. Like that's very rare too. Wow. So when you joined the Air Force, did you go into an HR role, or what did you kind of start in the Air Force, and what was that experience like? Did you go on different deployments? I mean, tell us that phase of life and then how you ended up in HR.
Okay, people are going to say this girl has just really done a whole bunch of crazy, wild, absurd things.
That's the point of the podcast. That's the point. We want the crazy. Yes.
So my job in the military was a meteorologist. And so I was a nerd. Always been a nerd. May not look like it, but trust me, I was. And so I went into meteorology. While I was in that field, though, we always get extra duties. You may be, for example, someone in IT, but then they have you, cleaning the bathroom. So you're also IT and a custodian, right? It just happens. It happens. So for me, I was a meteorologist, but then they started to want us to figure out how to make the schedules better for everybody, because some people would come in and work 12 hours, some people would work 4 hours, and it was like, this is not really fair. And so that was one of the first HR-related tasks that I ever had, and it was, kind of shift scheduling. And then they wanted us to figure out ways to make people work more efficiently, right? And so that was something we were also tasked with. So in addition to this meteorology stuff, I had this other component and I realized I loved it. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know what it was attached to, but I said, well, let me go into business, start working on a business degree and see if I see some of these things. And so long story short, I started to realize that they were of an HR, aspect. And so I went from military as a meteorologist and started, developing my passion for HR. And that's how we kind of got to where I am now.
Wow. So you get out of the military. I know you work the corporate route. So what was that transition like going from Air Force to civilian like?
It was challenging. It was challenging because I think in the military, you have that expectation that when you get out, everything is going to be easy. Like, I serve my country. It doesn't matter if you served a day or you served 22 years, you think I served my country. Everybody's going to be lining up to hire me. And then you get out and you realize that's not the reality. So it was, a little bit of a shock for me, but also it inspired me. It gave me motivation to say, okay, these people don't want me right now because they don't know my value. So I have to show them that I am of value for them to want to be able to hire me. And that's essentially what I did. So yes, it was a challenge. It took some time. I went an alternate route because what you don't know probably is that when I first got out of the military, I started working in banking. I was a financial counselor.
Oh.
Yeah. So military, meteorologist, financial counselor, and then HR. I've kind of done a little bit of, a couple of different things. But yeah, so I started doing the financial counseling. I love that. I love learning about money, teaching people how to save money, be thrifty, teaching people how to build credit, establish credit and wealth and all those things. So it worked out. But I still always longed for those HR responsibilities. And so long story short, I ended up earning my master's degree in HR management and business administration and getting a job in, human resources. And 15, 20 years later, here we are.
Wow. So what did you see kind of on the corporate side that made you say, I want to do this myself? Or when did that kind of itch start happening to start your own business?
So this is the not so glamorous part of things. So
let's hear it.
I spoke a little bit about the transition being difficult from military to civilian, right? One of the things that made it difficult too was you think also that, when I have a degree, again, people are going to line up to hire me. So here I am, this person with this military experience, right? I also have not only a bachelor's degree, but I earned a master's degree. And it still was a challenge for me to get hired in human resources. So I had to go back. My father is an entrepreneur. He had owned, a construction company, and I had done some work for him, more so HR related tasks. Again, even at the time, didn't really know exactly what it all was. But I started being able to draw on some of those experiences and to use that information to be able to, I guess, market and sell myself. And so with doing that, I was able to say, okay, this is what I know I want to do. HR is something that I know I absolutely want to do. It's taken me a little bit of, time to kind of get into it, but just stick with it. And so I had a friend while I was working in banking to come and provide me with a job description of a job that had been posted that was available. And so I said, well, let me apply. So I applied for that, and I ended up working 4 years as an HR manager for my hometown, the city of Moss Point, where I was from. So the corporate side, so just working in different, public sector environments in Mississippi and in Texas, I started to realize that as much as I love it, I didn't love having to make decisions that I didn't agree with. And often you have to do that, especially in HR. Sometimes you have to terminate a person that you feel should be placed on a performance improvement plan. Or you have to have a discussion with somebody who is being suspended when you feel like that suspension should have been 3 days versus it being, 2 weeks. And I don't like doing that because I feel like I'm supporting a decision, or I'm showing face like I'm supporting a decision that I didn't really support. So after doing that for, a few different roles, I said, you know what? I can create my own company. I saw my father being an entrepreneur. I can create my own company, and I can choose what discussions I have, what decisions I make for myself, and still make a decent income. So that's really what motivated me to start my own company in HR.
And it's so interesting because when people are like, oh, I want to go into HR and help people, it's like, yes, but nobody's talking about how you have to make those decisions, even when you don't agree with them. And if you're an empathetic person and you take that home and you feel bad, and it's just, you can't see, but he's just talking to herself.
I'm definitely. So it's hard for me. It's hard for me to tell somebody that, and I know you get to know these people. If you're good in HR and you're just a people person, you get to know the people that you work with. They're just not a name or a number or a position. They're humans. And so for me, it's hard to have a conversation with somebody and say, you're not going to be able to feed your family. Now you're going to have to go and look for a job. And by the way, while you're looking for a job, the job market has tanked. So it's going to take you probably 36 months to find a job. Like, that weighs on me. So to say, it's hard being an empath in this role. It definitely is. You learn to adjust. But at the same time, another reason why I started my own business, I don't have to have those conversations anymore.
So you start this business. I'm guessing we had the backing or support from dad being an entrepreneur. And I come from entrepreneurs on both sides of the family, which is funny too. But how was that transition like? Was it scary? Were you just like, oh shit, I'm really going to do this? Or how was that kind of piece of it? And then when did you finally make the decision, like, I'm doing this, I'm all in?
Scary is an understatement. It was terrifying because I was making, I'm very transparent about pay and things like that. I was making about $80,000 on my previous job when I left, right? So, and people tell you all kinds of things, don't blow through your savings on a business because most businesses fail in the first 5 years. Don't pull from your retirement. Don't do all of this stuff. You're going to pay penalties. I did all the stuff they told you not to do. So,
do what you got to do.
Yeah, you do what you have to do. I did have support from my family, but I've always been very independent in that. I've always been motivated enough and ambitious enough to try to figure out a way so that I don't have to necessarily borrow from family and things like that. But I did have their support, so it was very helpful. But I did leave that first year making $80K in that previous job. So my first client, I had my first client. I got that client pretty quickly, but I only made about $3,000. I think it was like $2,567 or something like that. $3,000. So I went from $80,000 a year to that first year with this business making $3,000. It hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So the terrifying piece really kicked into overdrive. But what I realized from that experience was that I had done a lot of things prior to make it a little bit easier for me with having savings, with having retirement. And COVID, believe it or not, COVID actually helped me because during the time of COVID, there was a new law that kind of went into place where if you pull money from your retirement, you didn't have to pay both penalties, right? So you didn't have to pay that early withdrawal penalty plus the 20% or whatever it was. And so for me, I used that. So it didn't hurt as much for me to pull some money out of my retirement. And now, like, I've been able to, pretty much put all that money back, save, and then build my business to 6 figures. So it was terrifying, but it worked out.
And I'm sorry, Michelle, who's my financial advisor and has been on this podcast. I apologize for the comment, but I agree about pulling from your savings. Like, you do what you have to do. And, it's drilled into our heads from such a young age, the American dream, and let's invest and it's going to work out. What if you don't make it? What if you don't make it to that time? Or why not invest in your dream now? So maybe you're retired by a certain age and I don't need to pull from my retirement. So I'm all on board for that. I preach that and scream that from any mountain there. It's so true because you have to do what you have to do. And especially I'm also self-funded and it's stressful. When you look at those bank accounts, you're like, okay, it's going to work out. It's going to be fine. Like, you got this. Lots of tears, all of that. So how did you kind of muster through that and making it like, hey, I know this is going to work out? Because that's hard. I mean, there's a reason that stat exists that most businesses fail in the first 5 years.
So how do I make through it? So one thing that you said was lots of tears. So yes, I second that.
I love my makeup spray. She is beautiful. Thank you. Yes.
For the most part, I've lived alone. And so not too many people got to see me cry. So that helps too. But yeah, so lots of tears. Also, having a support network. People undervalue, in my opinion. They undervalue having a support network. Those people who you could call or text and just say, I'm having a bad day. I can't call you, but I just need some support. Or reaching out to, a colleague or a mentor even and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. I'm stressing about it. Can you give me a story or share something with me, to kind of help me pull myself out of this? Therapy. Therapy is another thing. I am a huge proponent of therapy. I went to my therapist multiple times and said, hey, listen, I don't know what my next month is going to be like. I don't even know if I know what my next week is going to be like, so therapy, having a good support network, and then faith. I was always faithful. Like, I knew that I could fail, but I always had faith that I was going to do the things that I needed to do to make sure that I didn't fail. And so far, it's worked for me. I will be 5 years in the business in January of 2025. So I am hoping, thinking, praying that my business will not be one of those that fails in the first 5 years.
I got a month, so I feel that. But thank you for saying people undervalue the support system. I call them my oh shit friends, where I'm like, I'm having a bad day outside of, the partner, the friends, the people that, they're supposed to be there for you. And it is a different conversation. And I think I talked about this on the last podcast I recorded, but we have the people we grew up with or the people you served with or those people. But when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's great. It can be lonely, but it's just like a whole other level of stress that you kind of have to call on those people. And thank you for talking about therapy, because therapy has been absolutely life-changing, and to validate your problems or even thinking about it from a different perspective. So my therapist hit me with, oh, the same negative self-talk. Would you talk to your clients like that when you're career coaching clients? I'm like, of course not. Don't call me out on that. No.
Yeah. My family's just so many a times to take a mirror and just put it in. It's like, repeat what you said, and I'll put the mirror in your face. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it.
Okay. I see what you did there. Okay. I won't do that. Fine. Right? Yes. So how are you different? Let's say a small business or potential client wants to work with you. How are you different than some of these big HR firms, and rather than having like an internal HR department if a company is not ready for that?
So one of the things that I feel makes me a little bit different is I have all of the experience, so to speak. So I have the HR experience in military. I have the military background. I also have background in public sector as well as private sector. And a lot of companies, the bigger companies will have one or two people that, have done some of that, but it's very few that actually have all of that. And this is like statistically proven. And so the fact that I've had all of those experiences when I'm coming into a situation with a client and having discussions with clients, and they're saying, well, we have this military component. And it's like, oh, I can assist with that. And they're like, oh, well, we have a lot of people who work in the private sector. And so they're used to a certain set of rules. Oh, I have that experience as well. And then when they're like public sector, local government, county government, I work for local, county, and state. And so those shared experiences allow me to be able to work with my clients in a better way because I'm not having to do as much research or pull as many people in to the discussions or the conversations to get the work done.
And it's so different too, because hiring military is completely different than if you're going after graduates or if you're going public, private, and having that diversified skill set. I know from my perspective is so unmatched because it's not to get on all the fights I used to have in corporate when I used to do recruiting of people just not understanding the differentials there. And it does make a big difference. Now, your story, and I'm going to butcher it, you were featured in AfroTech, Business Insider, Yahoo News, and I feel like I'm forgetting a few others. Like, tell us that story, because that's like, I'm like edging at my seat to hear this one.
Hopefully it's okay for me to do this, but I have to plug the organization NASE.
Yes.
National Association for the Self-Employed. I love NASE because NASE is the reason why I was featured, by Business Insider initially, right? So what happened there is NASE often reaches out to, its members and they'll ask, hey, what can we do to help your business grow? And I was like, well, I need to get my name and my business out there. I need to get my story out there. And so they connected me with an interviewer from Business Insider. And Business Insider was like, hey, we have these questions with you. Your story is awesome. And there was also an element, so I was a victim of sexual, abuse while I was in the military. So military sexual trauma is what they call it. That's a story that, I share with people, not, for any accolades or anything, but just to let people know that we can be resilient and we can, make something that wasn't a great experience work to our benefit. And so they wanted to feature, my story, my life story, but also my business story. And so Business Insider, launched it initially, and then Yahoo News picked it up, and then also AfroTech. And so it just kind of spread. And before I knew it, it was like people from all over the world. People from Africa and India were reaching out and asking, can I mentor them? And so that's how that happened. It all started through my membership with NASE.
Just resilient to a T. Wow. This is such a big issue to talk about and bring up, and especially in a workplace, on military workplace, because you need to shout it from the mountains. It's just going through and sharing your experiences for other people to realize like this is not right and this still happens, and to educate people to be there for others or to help out in these situations because shit needs to change. So I just don't even have words because you're so incredible that I have 5 million questions and to keep it down and not waste your time here. But with everything that's gone on in your life, all the numerous transitions you've gone through, where are you taking your business in the future? And I know that's a loaded question to ask, but what are you most passionate about currently?
So one thing that I really want to do and we're planning to do is, so the Department of Labor registered our apprenticeship program. So my company actually has a human resource apprenticeship program that's a career development technician program. It's a 2-year program with a little over 280 hours worth of work for someone coming into the program. And so this was in 2022, the end of 2022, when the Department of Labor registered our apprenticeship program. So we piloted the program first. We had one person graduating in 2025, which will be the 2 years. And what's going to happen is from there, we're going to open it up and make it even larger throughout the state of Texas, because right now it's just a statewide program. It's not a national program, but we want to open that up to other aspiring HR professionals, people who want to join the HR field, but they've been having, a challenge because, like I said, it was a struggle for me too, even with having the military background and having a degree. It took me several years before I was able to get into, the HR field. And so I want to be able to help people and assist people who want to do that. And my apprenticeship program will do that. And so that'll help me increase not only their exposure and their experiences for them to get better jobs or get jobs at least in HR, but also to improve my business and help my business grow and to increase our revenues as well. So that's one of the bigger things that, I'm actually working on because I love to train, I love to teach, and I love to teach people what I feel the right way to do HR is, which is from an empathetic standpoint, but also from a standpoint and a perspective of, certain things just have to be done. But you can merge the two and still make for a happy and healthy workplace.
Wish everyone in HR would agree to that because that's exactly how it should be.
Absolutely.
If a company wants to work with you, what are some of the, not to give away the secret sauce, but what are some of the things you're helping your clients with? Or maybe someone doesn't even realize they need you. So what's kind of, and I'm sure you offer quite the gamut of services, but what are some of like the biggest pieces you offer to clients if someone's listening wants to work with you?
Some of my bigger projects have been, and I can't say if these are my favorite or least favorite. I do there's an element of interviewing for some of this. So I get to interview employees and learn what they do and learn more about them, which I absolutely love. But I'm writing job descriptions and helping companies that don't have accurate job descriptions to write those job descriptions, but also classification and compensation, doing those studies, market studies, because a lot of people have a lot of companies have their employees listed as either exempt or non-exempt when they should be the opposite. And so helping them to do that, there are a lot of companies who have this misclassification. They have some of their should be employees classified as, contractors when they are not legally contractors. So a lot of companies want to work with me because they want to clean that up. They want to make sure they're doing the right thing. They may have been doing something one way for 20 years, but, laws and regulations have changed and they want to get on board with, what's current, so that they are compliant. And so they work with me on things like that. So classification and job descriptions, just helping, those companies to make sure that they are structurally sound. And the other bigger piece that I really love is the employee relations aspect. So any of those companies out there who are struggling with the employee relations aspect, I'm your girl. I love it. And I'm good at it.
Good. You've been absolutely dynamic and just dynamite on this podcast. But as we wrap this up, Tisha, what advice do you have for listeners?
So I told you in the beginning, I did all the things that people told you not to do, and it worked out for me. Now, I'm not going to say that you should do everything or all of the things that people tell you not to do. But what I will say is when it comes to like your dreams, just make it happen. You're going to have 1,000 people tell you no and you shouldn't do, and you'll have 2 or 3 people to tell you, yeah, you can make it work. And usually it's those 2 or 3 people that are going to inspire you enough to do what needs to be done. Now, if I will say this, part of that advice is if you know that you don't have ambition, you're not an ambitious person, and you're not a self-motivated person, then maybe following some of those dreams are not for you, especially if it's an entrepreneurial avenue or journey. But still, my biggest thing, the takeaway from all of this is if you want to do it, there is a way to get it done. Don't let other people convince you that you can't do it. Because that's what I did. I didn't listen to the naysayers. I listened to the few people who said you can, and I listened to myself, and I made it happen.
Great piece of advice to even bring up if you don't feel you're as ambitious. Maybe it's not for you, and that's a real conversation I feel a lot of people need to have. But this was incredible. If you want to work with Tisha, you want to work with her, you want to see the article she was featured in, follow her on social media, email her, head to the show notes, and tune in again next week for another episode of That's Business.